Hello, once again, this is C's Listening Room, and today we're going to be discussing an album that many people consider to be a classic. This is Creatures of the Night, 1982 release from Kiss. And this is very much a transitional record. First of all, it's the last album from Kiss to feature the famous makeup. So they would actually go pretty much natural looking the next time around. So kind of a milestone in that regard. But additionally, there were lineup changes at this point. So even though they still have the old look and it's packaged like an old Kiss album with the makeup and everything, they actually were no longer running on the original lineup. Ace Frehley appears on the cover right here. That's Ace Frehley right there. He's listed as an actual member on the liner notes, but he did not play most of the leads on this album. Vinnie Vincent did, and he would actually go on to briefly become an official member of the band come the next album. Peter Criss, the drummer, had been out of the band. He had already been replaced temporarily by Anton Fig for the Unmasked album. Eric Carr, who's featured at the top here, the Fox, he was already and officially the new drummer for the band. So you're down a guitarist, you're down a drummer. This is a different lineup. And they don't even mention anything about Vinnie Vincent in the liner notes. Also, Gene Simmons does not play the bass on every single album or every single song on this album. So it makes you kind of wonder now how many songs on past classic Kiss albums had ghost bassists on them, somebody filling in for them. I'm sure there are quite a few of them and we'll never know. So in a way, it feels like the band also was kind of falling apart and unraveling a little bit. We all had this image of Kiss as these four larger-than-life cartoon or comic book characters that all had a vital role in the band. Each member brought something. Each member was a certain character. We had a favorite member based on their look, and we knew what their role was in the band. But now, by the time of Creatures of the Night, we don't even know who's playing on this album. And our whole impression of the band really is challenged. And our idea of this being a tight, functioning band starts to become a question mark. So it's definitely not one of the classic original albums with the original lineup where we just thought we knew what we were listening to and who we were listening to. And that's kind of disappointing. So I would say this is kind of a buyer beware album, and I don't think that this is unusual in that case because I think there were a couple other albums in the 80s during the post-makeup era where they had fill-in guitarists that we didn't know about, where we had ghost bassists that we didn't really know about. And so it seems like the band really was kind of spotty with their output. And so, I mean, that's not really what my expectations of a Kiss album would be, especially classic era Kiss, which is this or is this not? As I said, it's a makeup album. They were in the makeup, but you're dealing with different members and fill-in performers. So I don't know if this is considered if this is classic era Kiss, but a lot of people consider this one of their classic albums. A lot of people say it's a heavier album, that it's probably one of their heaviest albums. And that's probably true because you've got two new members. Peter Criss was a jazz-influenced drummer. Eric Carr is more of a rock drummer. So obviously the beats and the rhythms are going to be a little bit different when you've got different styles of drumming holding the beat down. Vinnie Vincent was a heavy metal guitarist. So Kiss, I mean, Ace Frehley, he was a hard rocker, but you've still got a different style. You've got a more 80s style guitarist now who's more of a shredder than Ace was. So again, with two new members, you're going to get a heavier sound. You're going to get a sound that's a little bit different. It seems like this is definitely a band that's looking more towards the future musically with that heavier sound. They're trying to reestablish themselves. But what's interesting is the one biggest hit, the biggest song on the album is kind of a throwback to the classic years. And that's I Love It Loud. It's a rock anthem, and Kiss was great at this. They had like God of Thunder, they had Shout It Out Loud, Detroit Rock City, Rock and Roll All Night, huge rock and roll anthems. And here they're going toward, here it's the early 80s, they've got a heavier sound, two new members, but they throw on this 1970s style rock anthem. It seems a little out of place for the album, but it's kind of maybe the glue that holds old Kiss together with new Kiss. So maybe it's not such a crazy idea that they did that. It turned out to be the biggest hit on the album, probably the most old school sounding and the most classic Kiss sounding song on this 1982 album that sounds like a 1982 album. But as I said, this is really a transitional album. It's a little hard for me to grade this one because I've got this bias in me of classic 70s era Kiss, and that's No More, but this is also not 80s Kiss. This is not the post-makeup Kiss. So I had certain expectations for this album, that this was going to be like party rock and this was going to be like a fun album, and it actually seems a little darker and heavier than what I would expect it to sound like. And so that takes some getting used to. But again, as I said, you've got two new members, so you have to expect that. And it is 1982. So this is early American, I would say well, not early American metal, but heavy metal started out in England. And then you had the new wave of British heavy metal, which is even heavier and even more, it's like more modern and less blues based. And it really wasn't until, I'd say, glam rock in the early 80s that there was a big American presence in hard rock and heavy metal. Kiss was like kind of the standalone in many ways, maybe Aerosmith. But at this point, they're coming in right when American hard rock was about to explode. And so they kind of got their head start on this big new American hard rock movement. I would say they did it a little bit better. They were heavier. This is a little less cheesy for the most part than what, and it probably holds up a lot better than what a lot of the early to mid 80s American kind of glam rock bands put out did. I wouldn't recommend this as a Kiss album to people that aren't really familiar with Kiss's music. This is not the album that I would pick for them to get started on. I'd probably tell them to go listen to Destroyer first, which is chock full of hits, and it's probably a better example of what the 70s Kiss sound was. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in the 70s that they could go listen to. And then I would tell them to go listen to probably some Bruce Kulick era Kiss if they want to hear proper 80s Kiss. So as a Kiss album, this doesn't really measure up to me. I don't really feel like this is a classic Kiss album like a lot of people do. But as an early 80s American hard rock album, it's still pretty good. I would actually give this one a 3 on the music alone. Just musically, and putting aside who's on it, who isn't on it, and the fact that it's a Kiss album, I wouldn't give it that high of a grade as far as a Kiss record. I wouldn't say it's one of their best. I wouldn't say it's the best example of their work. But as an early 80s hard rock album coming into the American glam rock movement, this is actually pretty good. This is pretty solid. So I'm going to give this one a 3. really hard to review it though, because again, it's the star power of Kiss that this album was supposed to be. And that magic was kind of gone. I feel like the whole Kiss magic was gone by the time the two original members were gone, and it just isn't quite the same. It just doesn't have that same feeling, though. Again, I Love It Loud tried to relive that, but the rest of the album is just, it's completely different from a lot of their other stuff. I would say it's not as fun, but at risk of repeating myself too many times, it's good 80s hard rock, better than a lot of what came out in 82 and a few years after. So 3 stars for Creatures of the Night. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.